Alright, today we are talking about the role of the DM. Many people describe the DM's role as the god of the table, the enforcer, the final word. None of that is super accurate. We need to first talk about the difference between powers and control and responsibility. The best way to frame any job you will ever have in your entire life is responsibilities rather than power or control. By thinking of things in terms of responsibility, you are sure that you are not trying to oppress other people or utilize your position for your own gain. You're focused entirely on fulfilling the purpose of your role. So what is the role of the DM? The role of the DM is to create the backdrop for players to play in. Now, I'm going to do a player video where we talk about that word play that we just toss around all willy-nilly, but it really is the right word. The DM also is a neutral arbiter of the rules. He doesn't have anything to gain or lose by making a ruling when there's a conflict. If the words are ambiguous, the DM can choose one way or the other without having to worry about the consequences himself. This ensures that he's not making rulings that just help himself, assuming he understands that it's a responsibility and not a power. The players can't make that determination because very often it would be obvious to just rule in their own favor. So one of the responsibilities of the DM is to make those rulings. And finally, the main purpose of the DM is to roleplay not only the individual creatures of the world, but the world itself. This includes mechanics, and I think that's important and very often overlooked. So he can create the backdrop of a village or a goblin den, and the players can go there, but if he just plays out the statistics and moves the pieces on the board, he's not really DMing. He could be replaced with a robot. What makes a DM special is that he role-plays every aspect of that. As a whole, how is the goblin den responding to the players? As a whole, what is the world doing? The physics, the gods, the planes, all the things that the players don't necessarily know about. The DM is role-playing those every moment of the game. And somebody has to do it, and it's their responsibility to make that as clean of a representation as they would a character. So the same way that you're role-playing your rogue and doing what my character would do, the DM should be role-playing the world and doing what it would do in response to you. Now, I say this includes mechanics because this is the translation from our fiction and our brains to what we're actually doing at the table. And those mechanics need to reflect the fiction to give it credibility and to give it weight. So if the DM is setting crazy high lockpicking difficulties for little padlocks, he's not playing true to the character of the world and the lock and the mechanics. So he really has to use those mechanics to build bones that we can believe in for a world that we drape over it. So now we get into the unpopular part. What is not the DM's role? Well, not their sole responsibility. There's a culture in a lot of games, and very specifically Dungeons & Dragons, that goes back a long time, mostly because most groups are one guy that is really into Dungeons & Dragons, and then 4 people that want to hang out and play a game. So there's one person that's overly invested, tends to be the dungeon master, because he knows the most rules and such. And then 4 people that don't give nearly as much to the game, because they're not as interested. This is not true for all groups, but there is a culture of it going way back. So these things are often thought of as the DM's role, but it's not. It's just not. So the first thing is hosting. Very often we play at the DM's house, because he has all the minis and all the books and all the stuff because he really likes Dungeons & Dragons. But that's not any part of his job or his responsibilities. Building the homebrew for the game. Very often DMs will build an elaborate world all on their own that then players play in. And that comes from that same dynamic of one guy being really into it and 4 people just wanting to play a game. But homebrew is everyone's responsibility. You should all be coming up with cool ideas and working them into the session. If you have a cool idea for a weapon, you work with your DM to get the stats right and get it in the game. It's not their responsibility to make a bunch of cool stuff that then you consume. You work together to build the fiction, to build the story together. Pacing is very often thought of as a DM's job. A game designer just telling you how fast to move through things? Absolutely not. The players have the ability to push stories forward. The players have the ability to take action in the world. They should be role-playing, and the DM role-plays the world, and that sets the pacing. Everyone is responsible for the session not bogging down. Rules knowledge is very often thought of as the DM's responsibility. He's supposed to be the master of rules. He makes the decisions, but that's not true. Everyone should know the rules. Everyone should come to agreements on the rules. There's no reason that a DM specifically should make a ruling that everyone else hates. That's stupid. Real-world conflict resolution. When two players are having an argument out of game, that is none of the DM's business. Very often it falls to them to keep the group together and kind of use that authority position to figure things out, but it's not their responsibility at all to sit there and babysit adults. This is everyone's responsibility. If you have a problem player, whether it's how they're playing or how they are in real life, the entire table should be together on figuring out what to do about that. If somebody's late all the time, it is not the DM's job to say, hey, you're out of the campaign. No, the table comes together and says, hey, how do we feel about this guy being late all the time? Maybe it's because he's taking care of his sick grandma and you can all suck it up. Maybe he's just lazy. And that is a table decision. That is not a DM's authority. And finally, balancing rules is very frequently thought of as a DM decision because they make those decisions during the game. Right? If there's a conflict in the game, the DM as a neutral third party with no skin in the outcome tends to make the decision because he doesn't have a strong bias. But balancing the rules, changing how something fundamentally works that is clearly stated in the rules, that's really a table decision. That's your shared fiction. That's the game that you're all going to be playing. You all have to live with the consequence of that. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is what makes a good DM. If these are the things that are the responsibilities of the DM and things that are responsibility of the whole table, what is a good DM if all they're doing is role-playing the world? A good DM is integrating player stories at all times. Not everything that you do, not every session you run, not every action a player takes is going to be relevant to their backstories, but it is going to be relevant to their characters. You are constantly telling the characters how the world reacts to them and what their characters know about the world. That's really important, and I see a lot of DMs skip over it. If one of the players is playing a ranger who has hunted goblins his entire life, you should have something to say about the goblins you're fighting, specific and relevant to him. Whether he wrote it in his backstory or you're adding it there now, you should say, hey, this reminds you of that time that this happened to your ranger. Put them in the world and help them find immersion. The more relevant everything you're doing is to the characters, the more immersive your experience will be, and the more engaged your players will be. Secondly, challenging the players. You can't give them anything too hard or too easy. You have to give them something that is going to put them in dramatic situations. You want them to struggle, you want them to fight, and you want them to come out victorious in the end. Now, this takes trust between the players and the DM. Very often, new players will get very upset at their DM saying, you're just trying to screw me. But that's not true. A good DM wants you to win, but they want you to fight for it. So in summary, the thing that makes a good DM is the same thing that makes a good player. And we'll have a video about that. But it's buying into the story. It's buying into the setting. It's being a fan of the characters. It's setting others up to shine and role-playing in that way that you are feeling your way through situations. So it's not the prep. It's not the terrains. It's not the fancy gimmicks. It is literally just role-playing the world and the things in it that makes you a good DM.